wanted to start with I wanted us to start here with a timestamp, right?
Okay. It
Yeah,
is 10:30 Christmas Eve.
absolutely.
10:30 a.m. Christmas Eve. How you guys doing?
Merry
Kevin
Christmas, Jeff.
Wishard.
We're
Merry
doing
Christmas to
fine.
you.
I just enjoyed a homemade cinnamon roll from my
Oh,
lovely,
there you go.
talented bride. So
Excellent.
there's action happening here in the kitchen, and it's all good. Mississippi mud was made yesterday,
Okay.
of course,
Excellent.
Richard's recipe. So
Yes.
yeah, things are good. Things are looking
A,
up.
a delicacy that's kind of our family's history there. So kind of
Yeah,
goes
no
with it.
doubt, no doubt.
So,
Yep.
have you got all the crew in for this
Yeah,
weekend or
they are, and they we're kind of getting it on our minds to. I will, hopefully we'll leave here headed to the Midwest on Monday. Is when we're going to arrive,
okay.
leave my parents' house to head up to the cool of Iowa.
Okay. Now, are you expecting the weather to have cleared a little bit? Obviously, when you get to Iowa, it's not going to be much change probably from what we're experiencing the last couple of days.
You know, it is going to look kind of like it does here now. And whenever I make this holiday trip, all I'm praying for is clear roads, baby.
I got you. I
No
got you. Yeah,
blizzards and no ice.
just keep those roads clear. Now, I will tell you, there's a little bit of glare coming from behind you, so I
Let's
don't
see
know
if
if
I can.
there's.
I don't know if I
Uh,
can move around. Let me see if I can move
I don't
this
want to inconvenience you too
direction.
much, but
How's
um,
that? Is that better?
that's a little better. Yeah.
No,
So
that's even worse,
that's
isn't it?
yeah, it's yeah a little. So
Well, let's see if I can fix this. How's that? No, it's
that's
the sun. It's the sun
yep.
coming through there. Well, let me
Uh-huh.
just move. Let me just move over here where I was by the Christmas tree. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Jeff. Having to kind
Keep
of
it keep it festive.
absolutely.
So
We'll see if we can make sure you don't get car sick watching me move. Um, so you guys are ready? Are y'all going anywhere?
no, Amy got here Wednesday. She flew to Atlanta, did a couple of days of work and flew right back. And then Jared flew in last night. So we're gonna go over there and watch the game today, and then we'll do some Christmas tomorrow. So
Well, I'm glad that they didn't have any trouble getting there.
no, I didn't hear it. I told Amy was going to pick them up. And I told Amy, if you need any help, it's a drive to love, cold weather. I said, hey, let me know. So, but well, the reason we're talking is to kind of get a recap of the season, both pro and college. We talked about college. I guess we can start there first. I just watched a little bit of the game yesterday, or yeah, I just caught a little bit of basically the fourth quarter of both games yesterday. Of course, the big stuff.
The Missouri game.
hmm And then the Houston game. And of course, the big stuff's coming up here in about a week. Do you have any kind of general thoughts on the way the season has gone? Anything that really
Yeah,
surprised you?
so I was,
You saw?
I pulled out the note that I had made back when we had our preseason conversation, and I think
hmm
it's obvious that we're not very good at making preseason predictions. At least I'm not. Wow.
No, I don't. We had some big misses. We did have some hits though too.
Well,
Um,
I guess there were five conferences, the Power Five we chose.
right.
I got one right. Utah.
And I think I may have gotten one right if I
Which one?
recall. Um,
TCU.
I think I picked Clemson. I did pick Clemson. And of course, they had their share of trouble, but they at least made it to their conference championship game and won. But I think we called Bo Nix that was a good pickup for Oregon. We like that. I think we both called. I don't know if we mentioned like a sleeper. I think you mentioned Florida State as kind of a sleeper, and they turned out well after a rough start. And mine was the same. I kind of had Notre Dame, if I recall, as a sleeper, and they had a rough start, but they evened out a little bit. So, but it, there was so much that we didn't anticipate.
I think,
And
yeah, 18 to 22-year-olds, man,
yeah,
you
you
know,
can't
when
you
you're
can't get
trying to make predictions about what they're going to do, it's impossible.
yeah, it really is.
I think just observations that I've thought about is I think defense does matter, right? And so if you're Tennessee or USC, I think you know that now for sure if you
Mhm.
didn't before.
That's
And I
right.
think great quarterbacks can, just like in the NFL, can make all the difference. I thought a couple other things I'll just say. I think Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley, I think they're going to work out.
Hmm. Yeah, clearly. So far so good. And USC, I wasn't really rooting against them in the championship game, but I wanted to see TCU make it. So I wanted to see that. And Caleb Williams, um, that injury clearly affected them. Although Utah played great, I'm not sure how much that would have different made a
Well, he
difference.
was
But
slowed down, right? He wasn't
oh,
a threat.
he really gutted that game out. I think there was a lot of under a normal game with reduced stakes, they probably would have pulled him out of there clearly. But um, so yeah, he's pretty impressive kid.
I think the
Uh,
other thing I would say about the semifinalist. I mean, I guess I've kind of just been a doubter of TCU for
mhm,
way too long. I just
mhm,
expected that show was not going to end the way it did,
mhm,
and about the only time I thought that there were, or I kind of suggested they might win was I thought they would beat. Well, I said they would beat Oklahoma, and they did.
mhm,
And then I thought they could beat Kansas, and then they did. And then I kind of thought all the rest of those games, those close games, the ones with Kansas, Kansas State, and Baylor and Texas, I thought they would lose like every
mhm,
time. And
mhm.
so I guess what I'd say is a losing proposition to pick against TCU. It feels like.
Yeah, yeah. Sonny Dykes clearly knows what he's doing, and so it's been a good year for them. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with Michigan. That Michigan's going to be Michigan, one of those teams that gets you in between the tackles, and they're going to challenge your manhood, and we'll see. Um, that will be an interesting test for TCU, and we may learn. They may get pushed to the limit in that game.
So just a side little note, Michigan has the helmet, right? I don't
Hmm.
have any idea which TCU helmet is going to be worn. Right? I mean,
They have about
sitting here
six
today,
versions, don't they?
they do, they
Uh-huh.
do. I kind of like the purple ones, and I like the black ones. Okay,
Hmm.
and they have multiple versions of those, but
Right.
and I don't know which team is going to get to wear the home jersey or the dark jersey, and which one is not. I
Well,
don't know
if
how
they
that's
go by
going.
seeding, I think they go by seeding, and Michigan's the 2 seeds, so they should be in their darker uniforms. And
Okay.
interesting matchup. And I was a little surprised. I picked Ohio State in that game, and it's just another example of in the trenches. You can have all the talent in the world, but up front, they uh, they just really manhandled. And Ohio State's no lightweight in the trenches, but they got that's what happened last year. Ohio State kind of got manhandled physically, and so I imagine if you're Ryan Day, you're thinking, okay, we've got to get more physical if we're going to win that game. So
Yeah. So
so
so sometimes it's kind of the way the ball bounces. Sometimes it's you don't really know, kind of the what's inspiring or motivating a team, right?
mhm.
And certainly whatever it is, Michigan has had the last couple of years against Ohio State,
Yep.
and that has
Well,
not caused me any trouble at all.
no. Is Ohio State one of your least favorite
I asked my
choices, or?
brother who, when he lived up in that part of the world, in
Uh-huh.
Cincinnati, I said, which team should I root against? And he thought Ohio State more than Michigan.
The
So,
alums a little bit annoying, maybe up there.
I think they're probably a lot like most entitled programs.
Yep.
They just belong there, right?
I
And
think that's a common theme is that wherever area you are, the team that you like, that rival you kind of identify as the annoy, that the blue blood entitled team that's your opponent, your antagonist. Those people you will find annoying, and that's true of me too. So well, now we talked to I'm talked to you, I think, about best games. Did you have a list of
Yeah,
best
this
games?
was
And I went
hard.
through the
Oh,
list,
this was
and
so
I've got a
hard.
list of, yeah.
Oh my gosh, this was so hard. There were a lot of best games that I did not see. I did not
Mhm.
watch. I was doing something else. But here are some.
Okay.
So I do have a list. So I'll run through about five of mine. I'll run through two
Okay.
teams, and then I'll let you kind
Okay.
of. I thought TCU's games against uh, Baylor, Kansas State, and Texas, and even Kansas,
Hmm.
very watchable games.
Hmm. Yep.
I thought Texas Tech's games, they came back and beat Texas and beat Oklahoma in overtime, and I enjoyed those games.
Okay.
And now both of so certainly that first program has been a prominent program this year, and the second one though hasn't. So I'll let
Hmm.
you. What were some games you had on your
Well,
list?
I didn't have Tech. I didn't see hardly any Tech games this year, but that's their history, is to play some very entertaining games. Um, I had the I had the TCU Baylor game and the TCU Oklahoma State game in particular. I did watch the Texas game. It was a little bit more of a grind, but the I was watching um, the TCU Baylor game and the USC UCLA game from Nashville.
Okay.
As you remember, we went to Nashville early that
Yeah.
week before from the hotel room, and both of those were really good games. That little bazooka play um, that was interesting. But you would think that every coach that's on top of it's going to have their special teams coordinator have that by now, because you're going to be faced with a situation where you don't have any timeouts and it needs to be not chaos. And
That
very
was impressive.
impressed with that.
Very. Yeah.
The game that I missed, that I lamented, was the Alabama LSU game. One of my college buddies was texting me with all exclamation points and said, "Are you watching this?" Like, no, I missed most of it. But
Yeah. That's on my list. So Alabama
yeah,
played about four games that should be on the list.
uh-huh. Well, and the day, if you had to get a day, the day was October the 15th. You had the Tennessee Alabama overtime game.
Yeah.
You had USC Utah that night.
Yeah.
And then I believe at the same time the Tennessee Alabama game was going on, you had TCU Oklahoma State, which is a barn
Yeah.
burner.
Yeah. Switching back and forth for sure. Yeah.
And that was the day. I mean, that was, if you had to pick a day that wasn't a championship game week or anything like that, would have been good. Also had USC UCLA that night. That was good. And then South Carolina was
Yeah.
one that they
Yeah.
had them taking down Tennessee, and I watched that from Nashville too. I had my godson's a big Tennessee guy, and he was just, you know,
That was
for a
no good
sports bar
for him.
watching that. He
That
didn't.
was no good.
A lot of the people around us were Tennessee people. I didn't enjoy that. And then the Clemson game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it's really interesting. Rattler, you talked about quarterbacks, and they injected Rattler. Beamer's got Rattler in there, and he may be a little wheels off as far as off the field, but he's he's dynamite. I mean,
Well,
he's got something under the hood,
they
and that
rose.
was
They
very entertaining.
rose. They rose to the occasion
Hmm.
for sure. Right. It's interesting how that happens. Right.
Hmm.
You have this team that's kind of not really been on the radar, and then for 1 week or two for them, two
Hmm.
Saturdays, they completely play up and fulfill their potential, and they're just
Hmm.
and the other team is down, right? I mean,
Hmm.
Tennessee and Clemson both came into those weeks thinking, yeah, nothing.
Well, and South Carolina ended basically both of their
Yes, yes,
championship hopes
yes,
in about a 3-4 week period.
yes.
And they're an 8-4 team, a good team, but for a team that's not competing for a shot at the championship, they've got two of the better bullet points on their resume this year.
100%. And
Yeah, that.
the one other game that I'll mention real quick is Oregon State. Uh, that was a close game and a
Yeah.
weird game.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't made my picks, but like I said, it's hard to pick against TCU, and
Mm-hmm.
I think Georgia's going to win.
It's going to be interesting. I'm rooting for TCU, obviously, but there's a part of me that won't be disappointed if it's Georgia and Michigan, because I'm really interested to see how those two teams physically just, it's going to be NFL level
Yeah,
physicality,
right.
intensity. I mean, they're going to be in camps, whenever they graduate.
Yeah. Well,
And it's just really impressive.
and Jim Harbaugh would be able to say something that not only a handful of coaches have ever played for both a Super Bowl and a national championship.
That's right.
Pete Carroll.
That's
Pete Carroll.
that's right. And to think about Harbaugh being 18 months ago, he was
Oh, yeah.
facing the guillotine. He was on the edge, and for the simple reason that he couldn't beat Ohio State, and he's clearly solved that problem. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
one other thing I was going to ask you about was, um, now the playoff. We talked about the playoffs. So you're going to right now. I won't get into
Yeah,
the shot.
I'm leaning
You're
TCU and
leaning
Georgia.
Georgia. Okay. Okay. I might be leaning a little bit more Michigan's way, but
Yeah.
I'm going to be very interested to see either of those teams, and I'm going to be really interested to see how TCU matches up with Michigan. I just think it's TCU. I do think the Big 12 is getting a little more physical than their reputation. They may not be quite up there with SEC yet, but you can tell that they're starting to pay a little bit more attention to the trenches, having their weight class, the athleticism. You can tell they're trying to raise it a notch. Now it's going to take a while for them to get there. Hey, I know you're a big athletic. You've got the athletic membership still, don't you?
I've let that expire about a
You
month
let that
ago.
expire. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, that's okay. But you may have read this. I was reading an article this morning I want to get a quick take on. It was Feldman he wrote it in May. It was about the hiring process that the coaches go through, the assistant coaches go through. It was written back in May, but they brought it back up because Leach was a big part of it. And that was very interesting. If you ever get back on there and check it out, it was
Well, shoot
really
me your
interesting.
visitor pass.
Okay, I can do that. I
Yeah.
can definitely do that.
I did like the
And
coverage of Leach. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, he was such an interesting character, and not even about football. The one I've replayed for my wife several times is the wedding advice. Did you see that one? That was golden, and it was so true. It was so true. I won't speak for either of our ladies, but in general, um, that's been my experience from an
Yeah. Yes.
observationally of other people's situations.
No doubt, man. No doubt. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, what about pro? What's your do you have any kind of thoughts on the season so far, and anything, obviously
Well,
we went over our picks and what we some of the surprises there.
Russell Wilson did not lift the Broncos.
No,
That would be a for sure observation.
that is really, really odd, and it kind of gives a little bit more credence to some of the rumblings we'd heard from Seattle as far as he wasn't really a good leader or locker room guy. And you've seen that in some of the like one of the defensive linemen just shouting at him after he came off the field. I don't know if you saw
Yeah.
that.
No.
And granted,
I,
you can only take so much from what you see on the sideline, because the fights and all that happens every week. It's just the camera doesn't always catch it, but some of that really seems kind of toxic to me. So
yeah. I mean, so in my mind, Denver is bad without an excuse. Los Angeles Rams are bad, and their excuses are plentiful.
Yep.
injuries, guys retiring, Von Miller leaving. I mean, all kinds of stuff happened to the Rams, and I think I missed that in August. I just wasn't,
I did too, and I thought they would hang on for another year, but we talked about this last year that when you go all in like they did last year, that strategy, in 12 to 36 months, your GM and your coach is going to be in hell because the roster has been depleted because you've traded all your draft picks and everything, and of course, if you get a Super Bowl out of it,
hey,
it's justified, but yet you have to pay the penalty on the back end and say, okay, we're starting over. And
yeah,
they don't have a lot of draft capital, and Stafford's, I don't know how much more he has left, because he's injured, and his arm's
you,
great and his decision making is great,
yeah,
but the injuries start to pile up, and,
it,
and
they did get that, they did get the ring, you know, and I don't know that they'll get back there. I don't know that they'll get back there.
Mhm.
I just,
Yeah.
I feel like they that was it for them. Now
Mhm.
that you kind of look at them this season, and
Mhm.
I think some other observations is, man, I mean, so we have 2 weeks left,
Mhm.
two weekends left,
Well, three
and
weeks
there are
actually,
so,
three
is it
weekends,
three?
three.
Yeah, today's
That
this
extra
is the
week, yeah.
16th week, 17th.
Mhm.
So 3 more weeks, and
Mhm.
I mean, there are so many teams alive.
Mhm. Yep, there's plenty alive. And now I get your feeling um, on who the better teams are. I Philadelphia is a lot better than we thought. We both picked them to win the division, but they clearly haven't let up, and they've got the luxury now of, with the Cowboys losing last week, they've got the luxury of slow playing all these injuries. Um, Hurts and anybody that has some, just any cuts and bruises, they've got that luxury now, and
Yeah.
they're going to be set for the playoffs.
I'm not
And
sure. I'm not sure that I'll say right now. I think they have better than a 50-50 chance of beating Dallas with Minshew tonight.
yeah, they do. If the Cowboys do not bring their A game, absolutely. And the Cowboys, we get into the Cowboys later, but yeah, Philadelphia's, um, they're clearly the best team. And the only question is, you've seen a lot of these teams to where you've seen it many times to where the best team in the regular season isn't necessarily who plays
Isn't
the
that funny?
best in January and February. So
Yeah.
that's, if you're a playoff team, that's your one hope. But if Philadelphia plays in January and February like they played all season, they're going to be in good shape.
Yeah, it's
So
kind of hard, right? I mean, you look at Philadelphia, and they do look like the class in the field right now. It's hard to even imagine picking somebody, but you're right. Teams get hot.
mm-hmm.
Cincinnati last year in the
Mm-hmm.
playoffs, they
Yep.
played. They had to go all the way from the wild card all the way through, but they got
Mm-hmm.
hot. So
Mm-hmm.
you look at, you kind of look at who's queuing up in the wild card for, either NFC. So, Dallas, the Giants, the Commandos, or whatever you call them. I
The
mean,
artist formerly known as the
yeah. I mean,
Redskins. Yep.
but these teams are also still, I mean, Seattle, Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
Green Bay, um, Carolina, New Orleans, Atlanta. Any of those could be in the
Detroit.
playoffs. Detroit. Yeah.
Detroit's
They
an
seem to be
interesting
kind of
story.
yeah, they seem to be getting a lot of attention right now.
Uh-huh. Well, and if you're somebody like Dan Campbell, it makes sense to say, hey, we may not be in the playoffs this year, but next year we will be, and this year I'm going to guarantee you're going to pay the price physically, and that's good logic for a coach who said, look, we're going to challenge your manhood, and you may beat us, but you're going to feel it next week, and so I like his
I guess,
style.
yeah, and then the Tampa Bay, is there, and you know, all I don't know, man.
That was really weird to figure. I mean, I know they've had some injuries on defense, but it's hard to account for how um, anemic they've been offensively. And I know you're not a big Brady fan, but I haven't really seen that much of a drop off with him. I mean, he's not what he was in his prime, clearly, but he's not bad. Uh, I'm not really sure what to make of them.
I think they're the scariest team in the first round of the playoffs. I think
Mm-hmm.
that like Dallas could end up going and playing at Tampa Bay, right? Because Tampa
Mm-hmm.
Bay is the division winner.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be problematic for Dallas.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You turn it on and you look at Rodgers and it's the same type deal. I might actually give them an equal chance in the sense that um, they've been banged up a little bit. They're getting some people back, and then I had a talk. I don't know if you saw the talk I had with um, the PD out at Stephenville, Trey, who's a big Packers fan, a friend of mine, and he was going through, and he was just. It was the week before the Cowboys played them, and he said, "This Christian Watson guy, man, he hasn't done anything," and it's almost like Christian Watson heard him talking, and since that game, he's been on fire. And you Rogers just looks so beaten and so frustrated, but they're still there.
Yeah,
So
I mean
it's
I, things have to happen, right? So as you
hmm
start to kind of look at who can get to the playoffs, some teams kind of have a path,
hmm
and some teams have to have things happen, and Green Bay has to have things happen
you know,
in
I,
their
ga-
favor,
I
right?
I gave that a look, and what has to happen is basically if the Giants and Washington run the table, then they're out. But they have an opening if one of those two teams loses even
Loses.
one or yeah, and they have some now. Granted, Green Bay has some tough game. I mean, they've got to play Minnesota again. They may have to play somebody else, but it's not far fetched. I mean, they're on the outside looking in, but it's not far fetched.
Their last game is against Detroit at home.
Okay.
So they have the Lions at Lambeau.
hmm
That's the last Sunday, January the 8th.
Which will
That's,
be interesting game,
that'll be a great game.
especially if there's
Yeah,
something on the line. That will be really good.
that
So,
could get flexed into the main game Sunday night.
uh-huh. Do you what's your feeling about the future of Brady and Rodgers after watching the season? You think that you think they're going to play next year, or
Yeah, I think
what's
if
your
they want to
feel?
play, they're going to play. If they want to
Mhm.
play, they'll play because I think, like you've said before, the an able quarterback is such a premium to have on your team, and I think anybody will give them a chance.
Mhm.
I just don't
I
know
think yeah.
who they're going to be.
I'm thinking Brady may retire. The the nonverbals I get from him, like him signing autographs after the game, and just it's almost like resignation. You would think that he would be behaving a little bit more like Rodgers, where he's just beside himself, and that's the way Rodgers looks right now. But Brady almost seems resigned to his fate, which is just out of character for him, which makes me think this may be it for him. I may be reading
Well,
him completely wrong,
here's
but
what I think the next 30 days may decide some of this.
mhm,
Right? If Tampa Bay wins a playoff game and is competitive in maybe two playoff games, maybe he thinks, hey, I can still do this.
mhm, maybe.
If they, I mean, if he gets, if they play somebody and they get after him and he finds himself on the turf a lot,
Mhm.
maybe
Well,
not.
and the Packers, I think they may be kind of looking at a Seattle, Denver, Russell, Maryland scenario because I think Green Bay knows what they're doing, and they clearly watched what happened there, and people are so desperate for quarterbacks. I could see now there's going to be a significant cap hit, but having said that, Green Bay drafts pretty well. If they put him on the market and say, make us an offer, and you get the the one and the two and the one and the two, and
There
that's
could
what
be some
Seattle's
musical
looking at
chairs
right
for
now.
sure, right? right? So
Seattle's looking pretty good right now. And Geno Smith, he at least provides you with a comfort level to say, okay, if we don't feel comfortable with the quarterback there at that value, we can wait a year maybe.
yeah,
And
so I'm looking at the schedule here. Seattle's last game is at home against the Rams. That feels like a win to me.
huh?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Um, anyway, I was looking at some of
Yep.
these.
Here's something I was digging into a little bit, and point differential. Um, this is something that I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and you go back through history, and I jotted down a little bit of history, and you use the Final Four of going back to '03 point differential. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams in the last 19 years that were not in the top 10 that made the Final Four
That's
point
interesting.
differential.
That's a big
And you
thing.
could probably guess some of the outliers. I'll give you a guess as far as the teams that. In fact, I'll do this for you. 1, 2, 3 Super Bowl winners were out of the top 10 in the last 20 years.
In point differential.
Point differential outliers. I bet you if you think a little bit, you could probably guess one.
So I might say I don't know. I'll say Seattle, maybe. I'll say yeah. I kind of want to say New England, but I think about that AFC East being so poor that they probably didn't have that struggle. No, I'm struggling, man. Help me out.
The Tom Coughlin's Giants in 07 and 11.
Okay, the Giants. Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
then Baltimore the following year, but actually they were 11th, so it wasn't too far off the pace. But you look at it, and some of the years, the Super Bowl participants were 1 and 2, or 2 and 3.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, you go back and look at that now. This year, point differential, and it's the usual suspects: Philadelphia 1, Buffalo 2, San Francisco 3, Dallas 4, Chiefs 5, and Cincinnati 6. And those might be the top 6 as far as who you would give a shot to make it.
I think San Francisco may have the best unit of all. San Francisco defense may be the best unit in the bunch.
Outside of the favorites, that might be the team you'd least like to play, because they're gonna challenge you physically. Their defense is really. I haven't watched them a whole lot, but I remember when I was in Nashville, I just had the game on and I was just watching them. And Arizona's not that good, but they were just destroying them.
It'll be interesting to see in the weeks ahead if they continue to play like they have played, if we start to get more familiar with the names on that unit, right? I mean, right now, if you said name 3 guys on that defense, I could probably not do it. I mean, Bosa's the only one whose name comes to mind.
Yep.
But it will be interesting to see over the course of the next 30 days if I start to get more familiar with some of these guys, if they keep playing.
John Lynch knows how to run a railroad, doesn't he?
I think so. And I mean, the fact that Purdy has played out of his head. I mean, out of his mind. I mean, it's like they're not babying him.
No.
Right? This is not training wheels.
No. You watch some of those layered throws that he throws. He may not be he may not have the talent of somebody like a Mahomes or Rodgers, but clearly we've seen you don't have to have that level of a talent to be a good to great quarterback, or at least a good quarterback in the NFL. And,
no doubt.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. And obviously Garoppolo is probably going to be somewhere else next year, but with Lance kind of sitting there, that'll be interesting. They've got a wealth of an embarrassment of riches there.
So when you think of those 6 teams, right? So were there 3 NFC and 3 AFC?
That is correct.
Yeah. So I mean, Kansas City and Buffalo. Who was the third? Cincinnati, right?
Cincinnati, and they haven't suffered the Super Bowl losers hangover.
Yeah, and then it was Philadelphia, Dallas, and San Francisco, right? So Dallas will not get to play any home games in the playoffs.
unless the other two wild cards win their game.
Okay.
That would be
Yeah.
the only scenario. Now,
And Buffalo and Kansas City, who has the edge in the home field for that?
Buffalo beat them. Buffalo went into Arrowhead and beat them, so they've got the advantage.
So think about this. I was talking to you or mentioning the dome stadium. There are teams that do not have a dome stadium. Buffalo, obviously, Green Bay, New England, the Giants, the Chiefs, the Steelers. I mean, these are places that are miserable, Cole, right?
Well, and
if you look at the teams that have dome stadiums, I mean, it's interesting. I was looking at this, Jeff. There are not a whole lot of Super Bowl winners who play in dome stadiums.
That's true. That's true. It's I think what the greatest show on turf, St. Louis, that they were one of the first, if not the first, team to do that.
Wow.
And so, yeah. Well, briefly, before we get off this thing, your Cowboys feelings, you're not clearly sitting here today. If we had the Cowboys had to play the Eagles, you wouldn't be picking the Cowboys, and neither would I.
Yeah, I told my dad that they're going to lose tonight.
That could be. It'll be an interesting thing. Now, the only thing I struggle with is just thinking, okay, how much PTSD, we've talked about this, is affecting the way you're evaluating them. And
Yes,
a Packers friend, I see him doing it too. As far as we tend to be more critical of our own team, and I will say that I think McCarthy. I like McCarthy. I think he's got a hard job. I think he and Will McClay are doing a pretty good job. And I think if I was going to criticize the way things have been going for the last 25 years, I think I would sum it up basically to say they've been trying to do what the Rams did last year that whole time. As far as you need to get one.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And whereas if you look at the teams that are perennially there, New England, Green Bay, Pittsburgh in past years, they were there, they made the playoffs 9 out of 10 years. And if you make the playoffs 9 out of 10 years with a team that can play playoff football, where you're able to run, stop the run, rush the passer, not turn the ball over, you're going to have a better chance instead of just trying to put all your chips in one year.
I agree. I think the only teams that I would pick, I don't think that I see Dallas. I would not see Dallas losing to any teams other than San Francisco and Philadelphia moving forward. That I would expect them to beat everyone, but I think that I don't trust Dak as much as I wish I could.
Unfortunately,
and the defense is just going to have to start playing like they were, 5 weeks ago, right?
That's what they'll need. Well, man, this has been good. Maybe we can catch up after maybe a little bit further into the playoffs, and after the college playoff, maybe we can hit you up then. So
absolutely. Merry Christmas to you guys, and tell your family happy holidays from me, and I hope you guys enjoy your time together.
Same here. Same for me and Donna.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.